Welcome to the Beau Show, an Epoch TV and NTD presentation. I attended the recent American Freedom Tour in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. This tour boasts a bevy of speakers in the conservative movement, from financial experts to spiritual leaders to Donald Trump Jr. Chris Widener, who is the MC and president for the tour, says that the American Freedom Tour is designed to empower conservative leaders to meet and learn and share ideas. This is about taking action. When you think about CPAC, or the Conservative Political Action Conference, which I will be attending this week in Orlando, the key word is action. So the American Freedom Tour is in some ways like a one-day CPAC that comes to you. It engages people who are likely already leaders, but want the tools and the inspiration to be able to reclaim American values. The tour rests on 4 pillars. And within the event hall, they are indeed pillars that occupy a significant portion of the stage. It's the 4 F's. Number 1 is faith. They recognize that the founders of this country were people of great faith who wanted to practice that faith without persecution, but also who wrote our founding documents guided by faith. 2, family, the most important social construct. They recognize that the family is under attack by the left, and specifically, men are under attack. 3rd, finance. Conservatives have been known to be more financially focused in terms of spending, and this tour brings experts who can help you get your finances in order, especially as we see record inflation numbers. They want to give you financial tools to succeed and prosper. The American dream inevitably means an abundance of financial prosperity. And finally, freedom. If there is no freedom, there is no America. This is still the great experiment in self-government, and we've been pretty successful at it. And again, they state their main goal of participating in the process. It's action, whether that's getting involved at the local and state level of elections or other levels of leadership. There's a very Tony Robbins quality to this tour, and he's even mentioned several times throughout. They want to celebrate America, which we don't see so often anymore. I certainly found the irony of hearing Neil Young's "Rockin' in the Free World" as soon as I stepped into the venue, given Neil's recent Spotify kerfuffle. There were about 12 speakers in total, and I want to give you the highlights, because they all had some basic overarching themes, but each one brought a unique voice to the stage. The first main speaker was Dr. Steve Turley, an author. His first act on stage was ripping up a mask, referring to it as a muzzle, not a mask. He says this isn't science, it's silence, and silence is compliance. This all is within the backdrop of a number of blue states dropping mask mandates, as they have become quite unpopular. Turley referenced Justin Trudeau, calling him Little Fidel. He then talked about the sweeping gubernatorial victory of Glenn Youngkin in Virginia, and how that was a tipping point of a blue state flipping, in large part due to the horrific school boards there. Youngkin won more votes than any of his GOP predecessors. Virginia woke up. In Spain, he referenced the People's Party defeating the Socialists with the motto, "Choose this day, liberty or communism." He spoke of 3 distinct trends which are a great cause for hope in electoral politics. They are the 3 Ds. 1, division. Critical race theory is fracturing the Democrats. For instance, for polling on Republicans, they are united against it. But Democrats are split 50-50 between the neo-libs, people like Bill Maher, who are against it, and the Bolsheviks, who are all for it. That helped Glenn Youngkin in Virginia. It was his number 1 issue. 2, defections. Working class Dems are defecting. Non-college educated white women voted for Glenn Youngkin at an astounding 75% margin. CNN and the Philadelphia Inquirer have done stories on this, calling this voting bloc in the driver's seat of American politics. Even those who might not have kids or degrees are seeing the education issue as a major wedge issue, a sort of revolt against Marxism. Finally, the 3rd D, demographics. Apparently, conservatives and evangelicals are reproducing and secular liberals are not, by about a 30% margin. And while conservative families don't always guarantee conservative children, the trend does seem to go that way, which means that future generations will be more conservative than liberal. In this respect, Turley calls it a new Patriot Age. The next speaker was former press secretary Kayleigh McEnany. She spoke about the way the press corps treated her versus how they treat Jen Psaki, and specifically how they are asking the wrong questions. When she was in Florida and got the call from Donald Trump asking her to be his next press secretary, her father told her, "Well, Kayleigh, maybe you were made for a time such as this," which references the book of Esther in the Bible. Even when she got the job and was facing this malicious press, Democrat Van Jones contacted her and said she was made for a time such as this. She says the only script that Trump ever read was one that she typed up for one of the very first COVID briefings, in which Kayleigh had written down a timeline for Trump's swift response of shutting down travel from China before there was even one COVID case in America. It was very clear that McEnany is a woman of faith, and she referenced many times her prayers and her faith guiding her. However, she didn't mince words about Joe Biden, asking the audience, "What is going on at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue?" She referenced Biden's poll numbers on the economy, polling 13 points upside down, which is worse than Jimmy Carter. Trump's philosophy was leave no man behind, and Biden left way too many behind in Afghanistan. She quoted her dad again, saying he described Biden as lost as a ball in tall grass. Because she was the press secretary, McEnany referenced a new Edelman poll that shows that 67% of Americans think the media actively makes stories up it knows to be false to fit their narrative. However, in 2022, the GOP right now has a 10-point advantage as we head into the midterms, which is unprecedented. It's interesting because this new Democrat-controlled Congress wanted to federalize election law, and their first proposed bill, H.R. 1, would have done that. But luckily, it failed. And I called it this time last year. You know, this bill is called the For the People Act, and I'm not so sure it's more for the people as it is so much for the Democrat people. Let's look at the automatic registration component alone. In California alone, 100,000 voters were incorrectly registered, okay? So that's automatically a problem. Then you look at the other components of this bill, wanting to federalize state election laws, wanting to prevent states from purging their voter rolls from inaccuracies. There's a push for DC statehood, and it doesn't address ballot harvesting at all. So I don't think this bill actually clarifies anything at all. It's not about suppression at all. It's about being pro-democracy, and this bill doesn't accomplish that. Now, with the fact that we know that the filibuster is not likely to be removed, and people like Joe Manchin saying it's never going to happen, I think this thing is dead on the water in the Senate, and I think it goes from H.R. 1 to H.R. done. For a time such as this, McEnany says, is a message for us all. We are all called in tough times, like we are experiencing right now. The next speaker was Dsouza, who has been known to make some very provocative films. He showed the trailer to his upcoming film, 2,000 Mules, which is about election fraud. Since the 2020 election, he argues there are two camps. One, the left, who says the election was correct and fair, and anyone who challenges that should be deplatformed, because a challenge would be a danger to democracy. The other camp are those who had a gnawing suspicion that the election was stolen, but just don't have any proof. Dsouza says that he's been pretty quiet because he wanted to do his research, collect the evidence, and then be able to definitively prove it. Anticipating the fact checkers, there has been not one fact check on his movie trailer yet. He's in possession of 4 million minutes of video footage. Dsouza worked with Catherine Engelbrecht, who has a conservative vote monitoring organization, specifically with regard to cell phone GeoTracking. She was able to track what's called a pattern of life of cell phones around the privately funded ballot drop boxes in the key states where the election was decided. What they were looking for, and they saw, was the same cell phone going back to the same drop box multiple times throughout the night, which was then corroborated with video evidence. This GeoTracking is what law enforcement and even the military uses, and how they tracked that courier to Osama bin Laden's compound. Businesses buy and use this GeoTracking to nudge you to buy things. For Dinesh, who is an Indian immigrant, he talks about how different the America he knew was back when he came here. He says that the American dream is what it is because there is no Indian dream. There is no Chinese dream. But now in today's America, you may remember that the Southern District of New York prosecuted Dsouza for a campaign finance violation and was using mail fraud and bank fraud to rack up the punishment. Dsouza had made a film about Barack Obama and had gone to talk to his grandmother and his half-brother George. And in this way, he thinks he got in Obama's face. He began to be attacked by BarackObama.com. And so it was Eric Holder's minions that prosecuted Dsouza, and Trump pardoned him. But Dsouza's case was a preview of what was to come with George Papadopoulos, Carter Page, Michael Flynn, and even Trump himself. He believes this stems from the idea that the left wants to force us to live in their America. Conservatives, by and large, usually think of our America as one nation under God, the flag, the anthem. But the left is forcing you to live in its version of the country. And Dinesh argues that the left has the media, academia, Hollywood, and big tech as their megaphones. And now they want the NFL too. They think they can get away with this because Republicans have typically been the party of nice guys, that they would never dream of using the government to go after anyone like they do. And Abraham Lincoln recognized this about the Democrats, that they had become gangsterized. And so the response needed a new tactic. And in addition to holding them to account, Dsouza offers some new tactics. He knows that we may not be able to win back 4,000 universities, but his tweet exchanges with Elon Musk are a way he feels he can persuade someone of that caliber to combat what George Soros is doing financially. Dsouza says that we should create the world's greatest online university at a fraction of the cost, to offer the academic version of an iPhone to make standard leftist indoctrination academia obsolete. He mentions the case study of his books being pulled from all Costco's. The CEO of Costco, Craig Jelinek, is an Obama friend. So when this happened, many Dsouza fans, and also Costco customers, began flooding the Costco website with complaints, not just about the book and the book's removal, but everything in Costco. And it was such a stir that Jelinek summoned Dsouza to his corporate office, where Dsouza proceeded to tell him he's the worst CEO in America, that he had just pissed off his customer base. The aftermath was Costco pre-ordering a lot of his books. His point is, you have to take the fight to them in a way that makes them jump. And look at Trump. Dsouza says it's like wrestling with a pig. Not only does everyone get dirty, but the pig likes it. Another big headliner of this tour was former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and a very slimmed down version, might I add. Pompeo is a devout Christian and has been called God's diplomat. Of course, secular progressive media always had a problem with this. But Pompeo said that we have to be prepared to stand on the things that we believe in, that we are at a moment in time, and that we need to reignite the Judeo-Christian values that this country was founded upon. So we need to proclaim the truth. Pompeo touched on some of the successes of the Trump diplomacy, such as ensuring that Iranian General Soleimani would never kill another American. How we served a dual purpose with Russia by helping stop ISIS-related terror attacks in St. Petersburg, but also pushing back on Russia when we needed to. He assured the military veterans who were depressed about how Biden left Afghanistan that their service was noble and decent. He said this to thunderous applause. With respect to China, Pompeo said we had enabled them to build their military might up until Trump, who said, no way. The challenge of this century, he says, is to push back on them, that Xi Jinping wants to inflict pain on his own people and the world. Pompeo was able to shut down a huge Chinese spy operation in Houston, but yet even today, the Wuhan lab continues to operate. The CCP is collecting Olympic athletes' DNA. At West Point, Pompeo studied the Battle of the Bulge and how the American troops were surrounded at one point. The enemy wanted them to lay down their arms, but they didn't. It is with that spirit that Pompeo says the left wants you to lay down your arms, but you have to say no way. The fight ain't over. But we are indeed a noble nation.